Well, earlier this week, another Uber vehicle was damaged on Hatfield in Pretoria after another clash between the two groups. A case of attempted murder and malicious damage to property was opened with police. Metered taxi drivers also laid a case of intimidation. We now cross to Gauteng Premier David Makhura, who is addressing the media on government's plans to curb violence between metered taxis and Uber drivers. This as violence between the two groups continue.
Family. To enforce the law and safeguard the safety of commuters and citizens. So we have worked that way. I also have appointed a special cabinet committee that work focuses on ensuring that the taxi industry is integrated into our broader public transport system. That includes all forms. The minibus taxis, the meter taxis, and all that. So that special cabinet committee has amongst the members of that committee, MEC Ismail Vadi, MEC Sizakele Nkosi Malubani, the MEC for Economic Development, that is MEC Lebogang Maile, and MEC Paul Mashatile. This is the committee that engages quite regularly with the industry whenever there are issues. Over the last few months in particular, there's been a very disturbing trend in the conflict pertaining to the meter taxis and Uber, the Uber operators. And there's been work which has included the two MECs over time. They have also been meeting with these affected parties, the meter taxis, in their different organized way, as well as the MEC for transport also has engaged with Uber. What is very disturbing is that the escalation of violence in the last few weeks in particular has reached proportions that are very, very dangerous for peace and stability in our province. And it is for this reason that we met with the police chiefs this morning, traffic police chiefs, the South African Police Service commanders, including the provincial commissioner, as well as the Metro Police chiefs this morning, and those responsible for crime intelligence and state security. I also on Friday, you might know, on Friday we participated in anti-crime operations, roadblocks in Soshanguve and on Moloto Road with the MEC. And after that visited the station, Pretoria station, the Tshwane station as a hub there, and where we also interacted very briefly with the meter taxi operators. As I say, I think the first thing is that the number of attacks across the province is now close to 300. Since January this year. 204 of those attacks took place in Tshwane, 86 of them in Johannesburg, and Ekurhuleni 4 of them. So the concentration of this conflict and violence is principally in Tshwane and Johannesburg. It's usually around transport nodes, and it therefore affects other commuters, not only those who use the meter taxis. It's around the stations. For example, Santen Station is a very common area. In Tshwane, it's the Hatfield Station. A lot of these incidents happen there. And in Ekurhuleni, it's around the airport, Kempton Park area. So that's what is very disturbing. One person was killed in this. Many people got injuries. Some as recently as last week. And the atmosphere is extremely tense, violent, and intimidation is felt by commuters and ordinary citizens around these air transport nodes. So their lives are being threatened by this situation. So far, the police have arrested, the number of people who have been arrested by the police is essentially more than 200. There's been, the cases are at different stages, but there's no one who has essentially at this stage been sentenced. So it is very important that as we move forward, to also say that the police resources in the province, the police resources that includes Metro Police and the South African Police Service, working with the traffic police, have directed a lot of effort at this. One specific thing I want to indicate is that I have discussed this matter with the Minister of Police and the Minister of Transport, basically calling for national government intervention to help us bring this violence to an end. We want to make it clear that whatever the issues, no one is allowed to take the law into their own hands. And some of the people involved have been threatening to continue the violence. And we want to make it clear that the law enforcement agencies in the province, working with the National South African Police Service headquarters, and in my discussion with Minister Mbalula this morning, the minister is going to dedicate a lot of support to this. We will establish a special task force, because in the province we have done that before. We have established, there was a special task force that's still in operation that deals with the minibus taxi violence, but we want a dedicated special task force to look at this conflict, especially the use of violence by those who are involved in this. We know that a lot, the meter taxi operators were involved, and the Uber operators themselves were also involved. There's a situation that is very disturbing for us in the province. I think also what's worrying us is that we're not seeing real prosecutions, criminal prosecutions, which is very, very important. And I hope having the national ministers will also ensure that we can fast track, including having a special courts. What I am worried about as the Premier of Gauteng is if this matter is allowed to continue, we can end up having violence that recruits people who are recruited, those who used to who carry out hits in the taxi industry, and some of them are the people who are involved in carrying out hits in some of the political conflict in KwaZulu-Natal. We don't want a situation where the people who used to carry out hits, hired assassins, are drawn into this. That's why it's a matter of great concern for us. One life has been lost. Many more people have been injured in these attacks. As I've indicated, they are close to 300. To be precise, the attacks are 294. They are close to 300. The police chiefs who we met earlier on are going to do everything that they need to do. As I say, they need support of from national government. The police are going to take action. I also want to just emphasize that all public transport operators in Gauteng province must comply with the laws of our land. And the National Land Transport Act of 2000, which is currently the principal law that regulates the registration and permit licensing of public transport, is currently being amended to look at what's called e-hailing services. But in the meantime, we want all operators of public transport to comply. We have often been very hard with the minibus taxi industry. Some of them who have applied, we have said, had come to us when we engaged with them that the processes was delayed with the administration. In Gauteng province, we also know that there are meter taxis operators who have applied, and there are others who are also operating illegally. Others have licenses, operating licenses. The precise numbers of meter taxis in the records of the Provincial Department of Transport, we have 2,909 meter taxis operators in Gauteng, but only 500 of the meter taxi operators are compliant. We have others who have applied, and the department has, in the discussion with the MEC, I've said the department needs to make sure that everyone who has applied is helped to get their operating license as quickly as possible, because we want to clamp down on illegal operators. So that's with regard to the meter taxis. With regard to Uber, we have received the department. When I say we, the department has 2,321 applications from Uber operators. You know, Uber operators, we mean the people, the drivers, what in Uber language is called the partners. But we also saying with them, they must comply. We can't have a public transport system operated in Gauteng or anywhere in our republic, and others apply for licensing and some don't. We don't want to enter into the issues of the business model, whether it's an app or not. But there are people who operate a vehicle, pick up members of the public, whatever that business model and communication, we are not interested. They pick them up from point 1 to point B. Those also need to be known. That's why even with Uber operators, we want to know how many Uber vehicles are operating, and all of them must be registered. They must have an operating license. So we're also looking into other issues. Members of the public need the certainty that all our public transport operators have a form of identification as well, because members of the public may not know if this is Uber or not. And often the operations, the criminal operations of these attacks have been based on that model, that it's very difficult to know if this is an Uber vehicle or not because they are not marked. The law enforcement operators and operations are also finding it difficult. We know that the minibus taxi operators, the meter taxi operators, and the 2,300 people who are operating as Uber operators, they are all in the business of raising income for their families. That we understand. There's high unemployment rate in our country. Government shouldn't be unreasonable and just clamp down on them. They provide a service. They earn income. All of them, we must ensure we help them to comply with the regulations and the laws. And those who really don't want the law enforcement agencies must clamp down on them. And I think that's our emphasis, that we must make sure everybody complies, but we can't accept violence. Anyone who resorts to violence, using violence, force of arms to assert their own authority, it's something that is not acceptable. As the Premier of Gauteng, I'm satisfied that there's commitment made by both the Minister of Police and the Minister of Transport will help us over the next few months In the coming week, they will have a meeting with with their counterparts in the province. The two ministers will meet with the Minister of, the MEC for Community Safety and the MEC for Transport. MEC Barbara Chrissy will be acting premier because I am having an overseas commitment tomorrow. The police, you will see a lot of police operations over the next few days. Again, the establishment of a special task force of the police, which will have to which national will deploy additional resources, will help us to bring the situation under control. At the same time, the Department of Transport, which is the regulator, will also make sure that everybody who is not complying, particularly those who have applied, they get their licenses as quickly as possible. The good thing is that both meter taxi operators and the Uber operators have all come to us to say, look, we want to comply, but those who are not complying, you must be seen to be acting. And that's what we want to do. Anyone who doesn't want to comply, we are going to ensure that their vehicles are removed from our public transport system, but there are also additional issues we will discuss. As I say, we want to discuss with these operators on additional issues to make sure that the public transport system is operating properly. So those are really the two issues that I will raise that have to do with, on the one hand, administration of the public transport system and its regulation. Whether you are Uber or not, you need to be regulated. And whether you are the meter taxis or not, you need to comply as well. You need to be regulated. You need to comply with our requirements. There must also be a form of identification. And then the second issue is that we can't allow violence on our shores. We cannot allow this. And the police are going to really take action. And I hope that, I was corrected that the number of people arrested, it's only 28. Just correct that. Only 28 arrests. But there are 166 cases. So there are 166 cases that are being under investigation currently at different stages of investigation. So those are the issues that we would like to say. I must say I'm very disturbed. Every day, every single case that happens worries me a lot. That we can lose lots of lives. But if we don't clamp down on this, we will have another form of killings that are carried out by hired assassins, as we can see it's happening in KwaZulu-Natal now. If any one of you would know that the history of taxi violence is that the corridor the taxi violence has always had was the Gauteng KwaZulu-Natal corridor, because the hired assassins were the same people, hired by the taxi people to kill. And it's the same people who are hired to carry out murders, politically inspired murders in KwaZulu-Natal. And if we don't clamp down on this, so what's happening in KwaZulu-Natal may be about political related issues, but what's happening in this space, as we have seen it before, taxi violence, if not stamped out immediately, can involve a sophisticated killing machine. And that's the matter that has gotten us to call for national support and national intervention from national ministers. We can't deal with this issue alone. The Minister of Transport was here, as you saw last week. He himself has been meeting with the meter taxis. But what we now need is really, really a change of gear. We want to help those who want to comply. But those who want to use violence should know that we can't allow violence in our shores. So I am done, Pumla.
Thank you, Premier. So I'll allow 4 questions. I'm going to take 3 for starters and then allow So I'll recognize you, Malungelo. And then can I take this to see Zero as well? Yeah, it's a group. Okay, Zero for gold. Letting us. Let's see NBC ask. Okay, let's start with Malungelo.
My name is Malungelo from ENCA. My name is Malungelo from ENCA. One of the things, Premier, that has been said, especially when I was in Sandton interacting with some of the commuters about a week ago following that incident, was that it seems as if authorities don't have a plan. All you do is to react. Is that the case? Were you reactional or are you reactional? The other thing you spoke about is that Uber operators now have to apply, are you then conceding that their operations are illegal? Thank you.
I'm Sam Zuri from SABC Radio News. Just to follow up on what Malungelo's question actually is, are there Uber drivers or operators who have applied for operating licenses, and there's some who have been granted operating licenses already?
All right, Premier, what I have is that we had an interaction with the Minister of Transport in July on this issue at Metro and 10111 Center. And he spoke about the implementation of the Land Transport Act that seemed not to work. And the Uber and which are app-based operators and the officials seem to be interacting every time, but however, there seems to be no change in their engagements. And that seems to lead to more violence instead of addressing the issues. I don't know if you're coming with anything that is specific that will actually deal with those issues, because we have been interacting with the ministers, and specifically we've spoken to the minister, to the police ministry and the transport ministry. But however, there seems not to be change that is occurring and that is taking place in this issue. Are you bringing anything that is specific?
Okay, so you forgot to say
my name is Babalo from CFBC Africa.
Okay, thanks, Babalo.
Can we deal with just those first?
Yes.
Yeah, certainly the introduction of a task force, a specialized focused police team, is a very different thing. We know police have a lot in their hands, especially in our province. We have specific priority crimes that the police are focusing on. So the reason we have decided this morning that we need a special police task force is to make sure that there are dedicated police resources every day working on particularly the crimes committed in this area. So that's a very different thing. It's not a general issue. Earlier on when we met with the police chiefs here, the Metro Police will be in there, intelligence services will be part of that. And the traffic officers will also be part of that. So there might be a sense of frustration that the progress is pretty slow, but I'm very confident that the establishment of special police task force will bring. That's how in the past we have dealt with. Once something is escalated to a priority crime like this, it's going to make a big difference. Yes, there are Uber operators who 624. You remember I said there are 500 meter taxis who have permits. There are 624 Uber operators who have permits from the department. So in each case, the numbers of those who don't have permits is more. What is the good thing is that they have all submitted. They say to us, we want to comply. So that's the difference. And we were saying to the police that this process, so those who have applied have got receipts, they have slips. Proof that they have applied for licensing, operating licensing. They can't be removed on the roads because it's the administrative process. We always do that. Even with the minibus taxis, we said to them, if you can provide proof that you have applied for a license, it means you are a law-abiding citizen. You want to comply with the authorities. I was saying earlier on that the amendment of, because Uber is new, technology is disruptive. Any one of you understand that. The laws in every country, when there's new technologies, it means your administrative and regulatory system get disrupted. So that's why there is an amendment that's currently underway of the National Land Act process to ensure. You remember, many of you only know about Uber, but there is a lot of other taxi operators that are not metered taxis. These other guys are called Taxify. And the MEC was saying to me there's more than 10 actually different. They operate in the space of pickup, you know. It's not a minibus taxi, but they pick up one person, move you there. So they are more than, it's more than Uber, it's more than metered taxis. What are we saying to them? All of you must comply. Whether you're operating alone or you are linked to an international business, you must comply with the regulations of the laws of our land. And where we need to make amendments to the administrative processes, those who come forward and say, I want to comply, we will work with them. We don't want to disrupt the provision of public transport, but those who are involved in violence, certainly the authorities will deal with them. So I'm saying, again, to deal with the question about whether we are reactive or not, the establishment of a special police task force is preemptive. It possibly has taken too long. I think that's important for me because we had relied on the police task force that dealt with the taxi violence in the minibus sector. You know that even in the minibus sector, from time to time, the taxi ranks are closed. You saw the Nandue. I don't know what Nandue stands for, but I just know that the Soweto line, from time to time, the taxi rank is closed when there's violence. In the east, when there's violence, that minibus taxi task force is still working, but it is overstretched now. We need a special task force that focuses on this sector very differently because of what has been happening. So that's we from where we stand, we going to ensure that there's improvement in the area of safety. You know, even here at the Gauteng station, sometimes the Gauteng Management Authority is seized with the conflict in their own facilities. This conflict spills in there, and if we don't stamp it out, soon people will not use our public transport system because it will become too unsafe. And the big problem is, what is the alternative in Gauteng? We have too many people. Those who are leaving their cars at home, using public transport systems, including Uber, to go to work and do other things. If they were to go back to their cars, those who have cars, the situation of traffic management on our roads will be bad. And that's why we want to consolidate. Our public transport system must be multimodal, different modes, but all of them must be integrated and regulated. It can't just be that you do as you wish. So I think that is our approach. Both Uber and metered taxis, the numbers that are licensed are too few compared to those that are not.
Thank you, Premier. I'm going to take more questions. Can I start with Mangoba, then Viewer, and then you come that side.
And
I'll come that side, yes. Let me just finish off.
Men this side, ladies on that side.
Sorry, ladies.
Okay, my name is Gauteng from SABC TV News. Prima, I just wanted to, for clarity, with regards to the law enforcement, you said that a lot of law enforcement will be visible from tomorrow. Where exactly are they going to be, and for how long? Because what usually happens is that after there's been a violence flare-up, the law enforcement is placed at a particular hotspot, and then after a few days they're no more there, and then the violence again re-emerges again. So this time around, how long are they going to stay in those particular areas? And number two, we've spoken to a number of Uber drivers, meter taxi drivers and Uber drivers when we did the walkabout with the minister last week. And the meter taxi drivers are clear. They're saying that they can never work with Uber. They are not prepared to work with Uber. And in fact, they want Uber stopped and they want it to be banned in South Africa. So how are you going to ensure going forward that the violence between these two is contained, and are there any planned negotiations that you're planning with the two parties to try and see that they work together?
Thank you, Member. Go.
Premier, as I was listening to you when you were on stage, and you were actually saying, as the government, you are not necessarily interested in whether public transport is metered or is Uber, is app-based, for example. But other than this issue of legal, having compliance, one of the bones of contention, main bones of contention between these groups is the issue of ETF. If you go to Gauteng station in Vicente, your meter taxi guys believe that Uber guys have more advantage because they can pick up there, they can pick up in Rosebank, they can pick up anywhere because they are app-based. And they are not only subjected to having to comply with government regulation, but they also have to comply with being told that this is where you are designated. You can only pick up incentive. Other meter taxi drivers can only pick up in mid-rent. And that's the issue we are saying as government we are not necessarily interested in, and which is one of the root causes of the violence that is actually unfolding. So how are you planning to deal with that issue? Because when you are outlining the plans, how many people are being arrested, how many cases, it does seem that the main preoccupation of government is ensuring that there is healthy police deployment and there's an attempt to ensure that everyone who is found to be on the wrong side of the law, so to speak, is arrested. But the issue itself, which is being canvassed by your meter taxi guys, is not necessarily entertained substantively, so to speak. How are you going to deal with that? And as we are just indicating now, it's not only Uber, it's Taxify, it's many others. And many others, because it's for industrial revolution, they are going to come. And you cannot stop innovation. How do you deal with innovation coming into your traditional way of providing transport? Because if you don't deal with that, we are saying we are not necessarily interested. Whether Uber can go to Soweto and come to Rosebank and come to City. That's the root cause of the fight. How are you going to deal with it? How do you mediate? How do you bring all of these groups within your listening distance or at their listening distance, collective, so that they can be able to collectively understand that they cannot stop innovation, but at the same time they must try to coexist. But if you don't deal with that, you can't. So I'm more listening, trying to get your plan in terms of dealing with that.
You are advising, you are not asking a question. I need to employ you. I need to employ you.
It's more a question. It's containing a critique. In a sense,
no, I hear your point. I hear your point.
Okay, Zibu Mazana from the Sunday Times. My two questions are to Dr. Badi. Seeing that not all app-based taxi operators are registered, are you able, as the department, to tell us how many app-based operators are there now in the province? Secondly, now that you are calling for them to register, do you have maybe a deadline that you have put in place for all the app-based taxi operators to comply by?
Okay, so we'll come to this side. Can we just deal with these ones? I just want MEC for Safety to deal with the police visibility. For how long are they going to stop and then stop and start? That question that was asked by Mangova. MEC, please deal with that. And MEC Vadi will deal with this issue about the physical allocation of operations, routes, what's called in the minibus taxi industry, the routes. The fight is always about the routes. So with regard to what we are looking at as part of the innovation.
No, thank you very much, Premier.
Can you shift the microphone slightly?
Oh.
Thank you so much.
And then the issues also about meetings with them. The MECs will be able to say something. Is this enough?
Yes, all of them.
Especially the
Which one is
Okay.
that?
Okay. Where is the, oh, this one? Let me see, just let's move it. Okay. Let me see, please continue.
No, thank you very much, Premier. Currently, we have deployed in Sentin, Tshwane, as well as at the airport, to deal with the violence that has been happening there. But it doesn't necessarily mean that other areas are neglected. Remember, we still have a team that is deployed in Soweto to deal with Nandue and Wata conflicts. So as long as there are operations in those areas, our guys will be there permanently. We have increased the number of the board in those areas in order to make a meaningful board or a Gauteng traffic police. We've increased the number of Gauteng traffic police in those areas in order to assist with some of the confusion that is there when such operations are actually happening in those areas.
Just for clarity, are they going to be permanently there?
Yes, some of them are already permanent, but we've increased the number. If there is a need to move to other areas, we'll move, but we don't withdraw completely in an area like we did in Soweto.
And just to emphasize that police operations, and there's a level of visibility that is standard, but when there's a specific areas where there's a particular forms of flaring up, visibility will increase. So out of, we have said to the police chiefs, we want to see higher levels of visibility. So what the MEC says, we have increased. Even in last week, but we're saying to them, we want to see higher levels of visibility around the areas, stations, public transport nodes, major areas where this violence often takes place. But there's a detail that we can't give because we don't want the guys to know exactly where. But yes, definitely sustained levels of police visibility, not in and out, based on the fact that the task force will now be, the special task force will now be able to, this is a provincial special task force, will now be able to advise the police what is the next level based on intelligence. What's the next level of maybe where we need to move more police. MEC Vadi, just deal with the issue pertaining to the challenge as was put correctly there, that when you have an innovation, these ones were allocated routes, and what are we doing to deal with this issue?
Look, I think both the questions are quite important. Firstly, we have, as the Premier indicated, 2,321 applications that we have received from people who are using the new technology. There can't be a deadline because new operators, prospective operators will come on. It's there in the minibus taxi industry, it's there for bus operators, etc. So there's no deadline whatsoever. Once people come on board, they must comply, they follow the normal processes, and it's important. You must have a PDB license, or a professional driver permit to operate a public transport system. You must have a roadworthy certificate, of course you must have a South African ID. Your vehicle papers must be up to date, and then you must lodge the formal application so that you can get the operating licenses. So those are the standard requirements that cut across all modes of transportation. It's not something peculiar to Uber or to metered taxis. So there won't be a deadline, it's an ongoing process. But an important point that must be understood, particularly in this sector, is that you will reach a point of saturation. I mean, you just can't say, open the field, any number of people come there. There's a limited number of consumers or commuters there. And if you oversaturate the market, you cripple the market. That's really one of the underlying causes of conflict in the minibus taxis. Where on certain routes they are oversaturated and it leads to conflict. So between us and the municipalities, because remember the application is lodged with the provincial regulatory entity, but we always send that application, we have to, for all public transport modes, to the municipalities to say, Is there a need in this particular area along this route? Are you supporting this application? It's what we call concurrency. If we don't get the approval or a nod from the municipality, we turn down that application. So there are a number of applications we have already rejected because we believe in a particular area, based on the information and the transport plans for the municipalities, that particular area is overtraded. And just to allow more and more people operate there, you completely cripple the market in that particular segment. So how do you mediate between the two? I think there are two different types of operations. A classical metered taxi has got a ranking facility. So whether it is at the station or the airport or at a particular hotel, the municipality in charge will say that, okay, in this particular rank, we need X number of metered taxis based on demand. And as a passenger comes, they board the taxi and they're taken to different destinations. But when they finish, they come back. That's the conventional metered taxi. An Uber-based taxi operator is not stationed in a fixed place. If you're an Uber, you can work from your house. You can park off at a garage. You can park off at a shopping complex. If you think that the market is stronger there, you park off there. So you'll be the nearest in the vicinity of a prospective commuter. And as the demand comes in on their central system, it gets directed to the nearest Uber taxi partner that is there, and you are asked, can you go and load up a particular passenger? So you don't need ranking facilities. Where you are right is that at the points where the metered taxis are ranking, like say the Gauteng station in Center, they've got a facility there. Now Uber loads there and Uber offloads there. And what has happened in the last year and a half, it tends to be in the same space and you're almost tramping on each other's toes. And that has been a serious bone of contention, serious point of conflict. Okay. What we will have to discuss with the municipalities, because these are planning authorities, can we separate, physically, can we separate the points where metered taxis rank and load and offload, and where Uber can load and offload? So if you take the airport, for example, with the airport's company, with the law enforcement agencies, etc., there were serious points of conflict. But in recent times, that situation has really calmed down quite significantly for a number of reasons. There's higher police visibility or law enforcement visibility there. And two, the airport's company has designated different areas so that you really don't come in each other's space. And you separate and you can load and offload at different points. It has helped the situation significantly. Doesn't mean it's a total solution. Because there is a segment within the metered taxi industry, a small component that says, ban the company, ban the application, stop all their operations.
And what we've just seen are live visuals coming through from the media briefing held by Gauteng Premier David Makhura, where he's been outlining plans to stop the violence, the ongoing violence that's been taking place in and around Gauteng between metered and Uber taxi drivers.